I must compliment you on your tremendous work on Teen Titans. The present-day Teen Titans no longer flaunt their immaturity. It is still evident, but it has been changed to the innocent immaturity, if such a thing exists, that characterizes true young people in a tumultuous time of their lives. It's become easy to identify with the Teen Titans, and not terribly difficult to believe in them. In fact, it is this quality that will keep me a fan for a long, long time.
That is what fan Mike Callahan from New Jersey had to say about the Teen Titans comic books that were being published back in the 1960s. But you could say a lot of the same things about the Teen Titans you're probably more familiar with, the animated series that ran from 2003 to 2006. When I think about how the show lasted for 5 seasons, that it got 65 episodes and then a movie on top of it, that sounds pretty good for a Cartoon Network show. But when I think about how it was only being made for 3 years, that's wild. That's not a lot of time. But it was enough time to literally change people's lives. So many people have fallen in love with this show. Not just kids either, not just in the past tense. Something about Teen Titans, something hard to define, has kept it in our memories. And that's what I want to celebrate. The people who made this show what it was, the writers and directors and artists. The show itself, its characters and the compelling themes. And the community that the show managed to foster. The impact and legacy it has left on people's hearts and minds. This is the journey to find out what made Teen Titans special. Way back in the 1960s, the original Teen Titans comic books started off with 4 young heroes, each one a counterpart to a famous adult DC superhero. You had Robin for Batman, Aqualad for Aquaman, Kid Flash for The Flash, and Wonder Girl for Wonder Woman. While the adults continued to save the world, the teenagers faced their own problems. Sure, they fought crime just like their older likenesses, but they also dealt with issues that kids and teens deal with. So when cartoons based on comic books started to get more popular, it makes sense why people would consider adapting Teen Titans into an animated series. And it almost happened before 2003. In the 1980s, Hanna-Barbera was planning to produce an animated series based on the new Teen Titans comic books by Marv Wolfman and George Perez. Cyborg, Starfire, Raven, and Beast Boy were going to be there. Kid Flash too. But instead of Robin as their leader, Wonder Girl was going to be in charge. Hanna-Barbera imagined this all as a Super Friends spin-off, and Robin wasn't available because he was in the Super Friends at the time. Obviously, this project did not get picked up, and the idea of a Teen Titans animated series sat on the shelf for about 2 decades, until it was picked up again by Glenn Murakami, an American animator, animation director, and producer. And Glenn Murakami would turn out to be one of, if not the, central person behind Teen Titans. So we're gonna spend some time with him. Murakami had originally wanted to become a comic book artist, but then fate would have it that one of his friends from junior high and high school got a job working on Batman the Animated Series. His friend nudges him in that direction. Murakami applies, and he fails the storyboard test. But the good folks at Warner Brothers Animation see his drawing talent and decide, yeah, we'll take a chance on him anyway. By his own admission, Murakami had stumbled into an incredible opportunity. He was getting to train in animation by working closely alongside the legendary Bruce Timm on the acclaimed Batman cartoons of the 90s as both a character designer and a storyboard artist. Flash forward to the early 2000s, Avril Lavigne is rocking on the radio, and Murakami gets promoted to the role of producer for the new series Batman Beyond. This show ends up being short-lived, but critically praised. Murakami wins an Emmy Award in 2001 for the cult series, and he gets to write for the movie Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker. Now we're in the year 2002. Sam Register has become the Senior Vice President of Development at Cartoon Network, and it just so happens that one of the things Sam always wanted to see adapted was Teen Titans. And it also just so happens that when they bring in Murakami, his vision for Teen Titans is awfully close to what Sam Register already wanted to do. Mr. Register wanted the Teen Titans series to focus mainly on the new Teen Titans material by Marv Wolfman and George Perez. That's the same stuff that the 80s series would have been based on, and it's also conveniently what Murakami himself had grown up reading. In addition to being the show's producer, Murakami also was the character designer and set the tone for the series' unique style, a style people would start calling Americanime or Murakanime.
Glenn, like all the guys who work for Glenn and myself, we've all grown up with anime. We've all been influenced by it all our lives.
When they showed me the first script for the first of the Titans, I wasn't sure what was going on.
We wanted to make a superhero show like no other.
I didn't want it to just be an adaptation of an old comic.
I was happy it wasn't identical to what I did, as I didn't try to follow what the people before me did with the Teen Titans.
Today's generation is growing up with Pokemon and all the shows now available on Cartoon Network, Cowboy Bebop, Gundam, and other things like that. I grew up with Speed Racer and Kimba, and then, in the 80s, with Akira. I'd seen a lot of different things being done with anime, and I thought it was a wonderful opportunity to tell stories in a different way. A very stylistic way. So it just seemed sort of natural that a hybrid would occur.
From the start, Murakami and his team knew they wanted to make a show centered around the characters. Exaggeration would express the heightened emotions of teenagers. Meanwhile, when someone was embarrassed and felt small inside, they'd draw the character really small. Like, what sometimes happens in anime.
The Japanese have something called super deformed or super D. It's the equivalent of like a Tex Avery-like take where the eyeballs come out.
Animation's about big reactions, and the old type animation was always about things, squash and stretch. Characters can change form, characters can change design.
With this show, we wanted something like that. We wanted to see how emotional the characters got.
This Murakanime style was very different from Batman cartoons of the 90s, but Marv Wolfman said he loved the show, and he told Murakami and one of the writers, David Slack, that what he had been doing with the Teen Titans back in the 80s was sort of a response to what had been going on at that specific time with Marvel Comics and X-Men. And if he was doing Teen Titans today, even Marv Wolfman said he would have done them completely differently too. Murakami's longtime mentor and Batman collaborator Bruce Timm was also brought on as a producer, but he would quickly tell people in interviews that Teen Titans was still a quote-unquote non-Tim show, and that ultimately Glenn Murakami had final cut over the series.
When we were doing Batman, we kept saying, let's do film noir. It's like Hitchcock or Citizen Kane. The crew was all on the same page. But with Titans, I was looking for the right analogy to use with the crew. At the time, I'd seen Fooly Cooly before working on Titans, so that became a reference.
The 6-episode series FLCL, aka Fooly Cooly, has its grubby prints all over the DNA of Teen Titans. Jay Torres, the author of the Teen Titans Go comics that ran alongside the original series, stated in a chat room interview that he himself is a big FLCL fan, and so are the show's animators. Michael Chang, who directed 22 Teen Titans episodes, also posted fan art on his blog and wrote little blurbs about how it was his favorite anime. Sometimes the FLCL influence is blatant, like in the episode Employee of the Month. The way Beast Boy is riding his moped with the helmet and scarf, it's a direct reference to Haruko from FLCL. And if you know the series, I really don't have to say anything about these panels from the Teen Titans Go comic. But FLCL's influence might run a bit deeper than that. FLCL has this experimental energy and wildness that I think may have inspired the team. FLCL also was using animation to tell stories about young people, their struggles, their emotions, and their growth. The thing is, FLCL leaned more into sexuality and adult imagery, whereas Teen Titans had to play by a different set of rules. Sam Register wanted a show for 6 to 11-year-olds, a younger demographic than what Bruce Timm had been going for in the 90s with Batman the Animated Series. And I think it's most noticeable in the earlier episodes of Season 1, episodes like Divide and Conquer or Forces of Nature, which admittedly can read a bit like after-school specials, with some really obvious and simple morals about being a good friend and thinking about the consequences of your actions. However, as the series went on, Murakami and his team of writers were pushing the show in a more mature direction. Without stepping over what Cartoon Network would allow, the showrunners had managed to appeal to a much broader audience than the original 6 to 11-year-old target demographic. Writer David Slack said one of the greatest things about Teen Titans was the sheer variety in the fanbase. Circa 2004, 2005, while doing panels and signings at the San Diego Comic-Con, Slack would peer over the audience and see among them little kids, grown-ups, teenagers, boys, girls, men, women. Teen Titans wasn't just a show for young boys, it was a show for everyone. They quickly settled on a core team: Robin, Starfire, Cyborg, Beast Boy, and Raven. These 5 characters were iconic, and they passed what Sam Register called the squint test. The Witch Girl is different from the Space Girl, who is different from the Robot Guy. They were distinct visually, but they also had very different personalities, struggles, and stories.
Robin's the leader, Starfire's the alien, but she's also a metaphor for the foreign exchange student or outsider. Cyborg's the strong man, Beast Boy's the funny one, but he's insecure. He can be all these animals, but at the same time, he's still really insecure. Early on, my whole thing was I wanted to understand their flaws because I thought that's what will make them human.
Murakami was tired of hearing how girls supposedly were not fans of superhero shows. His solution started with making better female characters. And judging by how many girls loved the show and the overall fan reception to Starfire and especially Raven, I'd say he and his team very much succeeded.
I think the show had such cool, female characters, and I feel like that was another thing I liked about it, was I was a little girl who, most of my friends were boys, and I was kind of a tomboy, and I was, watching a lot of shows that were aimed at boys, and Teen Titans, they had female characters on the team who were just as badass, and they had episodes like Switched that were entirely dedicated just for them, and I thought that was really cool.
Amy Wolfram, one of the series' main writers alongside David Slack, said that when working on Teen Titans, she wasn't just handed the stereotypical girl episodes.
Yeah, it hasn't been that way. I mean, I wrote an episode about a car. I think with the right support, you can write anything. I've written a story for just about every character, haven't I, David?
Yep, I was gonna say, Haunted was one of our most action-oriented episodes, and Amy did that one with Adam Beechin. I remember telling the licensing folks, I think people are going to really like our girl characters. That's generally not the case. I think sometimes girl characters aren't written with a lot of depth. We've worked really hard to make sure that on Titans, that isn't the case.
The third main writer is Rob Hoagie, who had previously worked with both Slack and Wolfram on, of all things, the Stuart Little TV series. Hoagie was so involved in the Teen Titans community that he'd even post on the popular Titans Go fan forums under a mystery username.
I think when we write the show, we write it to please ourselves as well as the kids. We never write down to our audience, and I think that's part of the key to our success. We, as the writers of the show, are also some of the biggest fans. I think writing a show we genuinely love makes for something that people will respond to positively.
The writing team, led by Glenn Murakami and also including David Slack, Amy Wolfram, and Rob Hoagie, would meet once a week and bounce around new ideas for episodes. And once an episode premise was approved by the network, they'd collaborate again for a story break meeting and figure out that episode beat for beat. The chosen writer for that episode would go type up a 10 to 14 page outline, get suggestions from the team, and click-clack-moo that into a script draft. In most cases, there'd only need to be 2 drafts and then a polished final draft. Once that was done, the new episode would be recorded just a few days later. Now, some things were planned out in advance, but there were also a lot of happy accidents along the way. For example, in Season 2, they designed this larvae for the episode Date with Destiny. And after that episode, artist Ben Jones would start putting one of them in all of his storyboards. He named it Silky, and it quickly caught on as the other artists started doing the exact same thing. So they'd end up with the episodes where Silky is crawling around the background, and eventually the writers figured they had to do something with that. And that's how we got Silky to be in the show as the Teen Titans pet. The writers took liberties with DC characters, sometimes to the extent that DC asked them to change the character's name. The Puppet King was once the Puppeteer, Fix-It was born from Simon, Cinderblock is based on Blockbuster, and Fang is based on Black Spider, Both of them Batman villains, by the way. Killer Moth got to keep his name, but in a past life, he too had been a minor member of the Rogues Gallery. Cartoon Network was always supportive of their creative freedom, and DC only limited them when it came to getting permission to use characters. In particular, there was a so-called Wonder embargo in effect, and it prevented any Wonder Woman character from being used in more than one place in media at the same time. This prevented Murakami and company from using Wonder Girl in the show, despite how super important she was in the comic books upon which the show was based. The team may have found a way around that at the end, though. When asked about a mysterious black-haired girl with a ponytail who appears in the hero lineup at the end of Season 5, David Slack said unequivocally it is definitely not Wonder Girl, but instead some other female heroine who will remain unnamed. The interviewer took the hint, and everyone in the room had a good laugh. Glenn Murakami gave his team a fair bit of leeway to try new things. He described their method from the start as an anything-goes approach. They weren't trying to make a typical superhero show, and they weren't even sure if it was going to work. They needed talented directors on their side to pull this off, and thankfully, they had some really good ones, such as Michael Chang, Alex Soto, Ciro Nieli, James Scooter Tidwell, and Ben Jones. They had Hak Jun Kang designing backgrounds, including the T-Tower itself, Chu Hui Song painting backgrounds, Norm Riang designing props, and Derek Wyatt as the character designer, who just kept appearing in the show a lot. Ada Van Wyck and Irineo Maramba were storyboard artists, Chris Hooton was a series colorist, and lurking behind the scenes as an executive producer and consultant was Tram Wigzell. Inspired by Murakami's vision and set ablaze by Fooly Cooley, the team behind the scenes became a tight-knit and special group, which character designer John Suzuki said had a tough-to-find kind of chemistry. As you probably noticed during the crew rundown, the Teen Titans artists had a habit of sneaking people from the crew into the show. These cameos would often start as little joke sketches or one-off homages, but whenever they needed to populate a crowd, these real-life inspired characters often found their way in. They even put Thelma, the Warner Brothers front desk receptionist, in the show as both a waitress named Pam and as the lunch lady at the Hive Academy. The energy was just so infectious. A bunch of the creators started making their own blogs and posting their art and ideas and musings. In those dial-up days of the internet, one of the directors, Ben Jones, started up his own blog, and he admitted that he was just hopping on a bandwagon. He said, "Everyone at work is starting up a blog, so I am too." There was a kind of shared spirit among the group. A lot of people loving what they do and proud of their work.
Any of them will tell you that from day one on the very first series, when we all got in a room together, everybody looked at each other and was like, yeah, this is special. Every actor is solid, and we all get along. We're good friends, and we all are actually hanging out from time to time outside of work.
Carrie Payton and Greg Sipes had never done a voiceover session before, and Payton attributes this excitement to why his signature was so full of energy from the very start. It was a dream job for them.
It's rare for an animated show that, after the recording session, the actors, directors, two producers, a coordinator, a PA, and a storyboard artist will sit around and play poker. Greg Sipes, Scott Menville, Carrie Payton, and I have all gone surfing. There's no big chip on the shoulder from anyone. We're all into it. Everybody cares. We had 4 actors come down to Comic-Con and support us. We're just so lucky. That's so rare. I think that shows in the end product of the show. One of the jokes I put in is that the Titans stay up all night, and that's because out of everyone working on the show, I don't think there's anyone who hasn't pulled an all-nighter. We're just really blessed.
Sometimes when I go into projects like this, it's really tempting to start looking for the person who made the show special. Like, I have this instinct to find some secret auteur and point at them and go, aha, this is the genius behind it all! But really, it's usually not like that. And it's certainly not like that for Teen Titans. This was a team effort. This was something magical that existed because these exact people were working together at this exact time in their lives. And it's something that even if you gather these people up all together again, it might never be able to be replicated ever. After all, things change.
I remember right after the record of Final Exam, I was having lunch with Sam and Glenn, and they were having an argument about what Cinderblock should look like. And I had this grin on my face I couldn't get off. And they were upset about how weird he should be, or should he be made of stone? And I just remember feeling creatively fulfilled. I remember after How Long Is Forever, I was saying to some of these guys, brace yourself. This may be the best job you'll ever have. I mean, you could have a job that's more prestigious or pays you more or you have more control. But everyone got along most of the time. And even if we didn't, it was funny that we didn't agree. We had an amazing, dedicated crew of really talented people. At every level, it was like magic. I don't know if that will ever happen again.
Everyone has their issues and struggles, and as long as you have a good enough support system, you're gonna overcome those issues. But you have to be willing to tell people that you need help. The second you open up about needing help, the more opportunity for getting the help you need is going to present itself. The show embraces a lot of change, a lot of character development. It is, I think, one of the more progressive shows that we got in the early 2000s that I think kind of got overlooked because it was a cartoon. And if, you are feeling like you've got struggles, you can very much relate to at least one of the characters in the show, because everyone had their own very personal struggle, and they got over those struggles, and it was a very helpful show as a kid dealing with some personal issues, just to see that they were able to portray these characters as having their struggles as well and making them relatable to kids, teens, adults, literally anyone.
Teen Titans is a show about how friends can be your family, how those connections can make you feel not so alone in life. As such, David Slack said it made sense to start the series off with an episode that had to do with this on a basic level. In the first episode, Divide and Conquer, Robin and Cyborg fight to the point where it escalates and Cyborg ends up leaving the team. At the end of the episode, they get over it, forgive each other, and move on. All with very few words, because they both realized that the fight was dumb, and their friendship mattered a whole lot more. Season 1 as a whole really carries on this theme that people need to stick together with their friends, especially for Robin, who was the focus of Season 1's main story arc. Along the way, the creators wove in these other episodes with classic TV and movie inspirations, but by the end, everything led up to Robin being tested, failing, and then rising again to beat the big bad, Slade. Rob Hoagie, on the show side, and Jay Torres on the comic book side, have both said that Robin was the hardest character for them to write. They had to focus on making this version of Robin distinct from all the other interpretations of Robin that have been in the comic books, other cartoons, and films.
I had to keep telling people, stop thinking of this character as Batman and start thinking of him as a whole new character. I kept saying, he's the kid who has something to prove. If his dad is Batman, then he's really got something to prove. So, he'd have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. He should be like Bruce Lee, little bit of a daredevil. He's a little bit of a skateboard kid. He's a little punk rock with his steel-toed Doc Marten boots and spiky anime hair. That's how we decided what our Robin would be.
For me at least, Robin's superpower is that he's crazy. He's got guts. He'll jump off of a building to save somebody and then figure out how to not die on the way down.
You'll just have to find out the hard way.
And to me, that actually makes him the most interesting and the most heroic out of the group.
This was a version of Robin that would spend hours alone in his room, poring over evidence, collecting clues and artifacts, surrounding himself with constant reminders that there was always more evil to stop. And Robin had this duality in him, where he could eat pizza and play video games with the boys and go on dates and try to be a normal teenager, but he also could get obsessive, down on himself for not being perfect, and end up trying to do way too much on his own. When everyone knows you as the sidekick to one of the world's greatest superheroes, it's like Murakami said, you might feel like you have something to prove. So a lot of Robin's journey, especially in Season 1, is him coming to terms with the fact that not only can he not do everything on his own, but it's also not healthy for him to go into that kind of isolation. As the writers were testing the waters for how serious and dark the show could get, Robin's arc fit like a green glove into Season 1's trajectory. We kept getting these reminders that a mysterious villain named Slade was the man behind the curtain, pulling the strings and calling the shots behind a lot of the crime in Jump City. Viewers would be dying to know who is Slade, so it made sense that Robin would become so narrowly focused on unmasking him too. It was an effective hook early on for a lot of viewers, even for people who weren't that big into superhero stories.
Yeah, I wasn't really interested in, like, there was Justice League and, like, other shows playing at that time, but I wasn't as interested in those. I feel like the anime, the sort of quasi-anime art style was very different. Like, after Teen Titans did that, then there were some other shows that did that, like Ben 10 did that, and Avatar The Last Airbender, but I feel like Teen Titans was the first one. And having, like, a really scary villain, I feel like Teen Titans, like you said, like, episodes like Haunted and Birthmark, they could get, like, really dark. And really, I remember when there were, like, parent protests wanting to ban the show because, like, you have Slade, who's, like, the scariest ass villain. He's not just, like, a generic, like, superhero villain. Like, he had that, like, sinister voice, and he was, like, he was just so cool.
Slade was designed to be the ultimate evil for the Teen Titans.
He was relentless, he was nonstop, and he wanted the Titans. And that's what makes him scary, because he's a guy who'll do whatever it takes.
Too slow, Robin. You always were.
Slade kept on taunting Robin, and as all these crimes and clues began to fill up more of Robin's room and mind, all the pressure came to a head with the episode Masks. Robin masqueraded as Red X and began to steal for Slade to gain his trust and ultimately try to take him down. But it backfired, because Robin didn't let his friends in on the plan. He didn't trust them. He felt he had to do this on his own, do it his own way, and he wasn't the only one to pay the price for it.
Masks was a turning point. I think I said early on, Cartoon Network asked us to do something you rarely get asked to do. We were asked to take risks. Sam said, I want you to do something you're not supposed to do. So there are things that don't normally happen in kids' cartoon shows, such as the way Starfire leaves Robin at the end. She's basically saying, you disappointed me. You screwed up.
Robin had a weakness. Sure, most kids can't relate to wanting to take down a supervillain, but who hasn't gotten obsessed with something and let it get to their head? Who hasn't driven people away because they kept secrets? Or didn't trust their friends when it mattered most? Robin is at a stage where he's trying to learn how to balance his independence and private emotions against his relationships and honesty. He isn't a child sidekick anymore. He doesn't need to be dependent on an adult for guidance. But that doesn't mean he should do everything on his own when he has a team he can confide in. Early on, it was decided that Batman was not going to appear in this show. The team felt it would undo a lot of their efforts to have Robin grow up and stand out as his own character if his father figure was just hanging around. And also, they decided early on not to unmask Slade. Murakami believed that a compelling mystery was more valuable than any explanation they could possibly give. But they still had to figure something out with Slade. They had struck gold. Ron Perlman's voice was chilling and menacing, but also charismatic and almost alluring. But if all the guy ever did was pop in at the end of episodes to say some cryptic mumbo-jumbo every now and then, the audience's initial interest was eventually going to wane.
I remember we asked, what does Slade want? So we thought, it would be the opposite of Batman. The series was a lot about Robin becoming his own man, Robin not having a father figure around. So the villain would be an evil father figure. So rather than Robin looking for a father, we would have the villain looking for a son.
It was actually Bruce Timm who observed what they had so far and suggested that the real story of Season 1 was that Slade was trying to take Robin away from his friends. David Slack then realized this could become a metaphor for a custody battle, where Robin is pulled away and literally can't talk to his friends and found family. Robin had been pursuing Slade, and now Slade would pursue Robin. With the Teen Titans, there was always a leader, but everyone worked together. With Slade, it's the inverse, because you don't have autonomy, you don't have a say, you are there to obey. It's a parallel to Batman, but in the ultimate form of regression. Under Slade's authority, Robin would lose his independence and be a sidekick again, forever. While I was researching for this video, I read through some old message boards and Teen Titans online forums. Sadly, a lot of this content is long gone. Some of it can be found through the Wayback Machine, and even less of it is still online. One of the message boards that I could still access, though, was called Forbidden Love, originally a Robin and Raven shipping forum. In a 2005 thread, one of the forum mods, Killer Moth, wrote a short essay titled My Father, the One-Eyed Man, wherein they compared Slade's relationship with Robin to his relationship with his children in the comics. For those who aren't comic book savvy, here's the rundown. Slade's oldest son is Grant Wilson, aka the original Ravager. Killer Moth writes that Grant is like Robin because both are brash and given to their anger and obsessions. Furthermore, when Robin reaches his lowest point, his Red X persona is very much like the Ravager persona. Slade's younger son is Joseph Wilson, aka Jericho, who we meet in Season 5, even if his Slade connection is never confirmed in the show. Killer Moth writes that Joseph is like Robin because both compartmentalize their emotions. Both are concerned about their friends, and both try to be careful about the damage that they cause to others, such as when Robin warns Raven about harming Dr. Light in the episode Nevermore. The simplified reading that I get is that Robin in Season 1 is like a split, somewhere between the two sons, and in this way he is also like Slade's daughter, Rose Wilson, who was once a Teen Titan herself before she was driven mad and turned to Slade's side as another Ravager.
Robin created the perfect son for Slade. It was a way to not only have a perfect soldier for his machinations, but also a way to undo the possible guilt he may have felt for his sons, as he focused on his double life as saboteur. Ironically, while it was Grant's similar fixation traits that brought the teen wonder to him, it was his son's Jericho's traits and the bonds Robin made with the Titans that snatched the one-man army from the soup and forever from Slade's grasp, and losing yet another son.
Slade isn't just a menacing villain in the show. He's also a stand-in for a psychologically abusive, controlling, and manipulative parent. Robin's struggle becomes the struggle of many teenagers. How do you become your own person, with your own healthy self-image, while living under tyranny? Thing is, Slade is also cool. He seems to know everything. He's always confident. With him, you don't have to worry about making wrong decisions, because he'll make all the decisions for you, and he'll win at any cost. He's got so many traits of toxic masculinity all rolled into one. And that kind of parent, in real life, can do so much harm to a child that's trying to form a healthy idea of what men are like. In this case, it's a teen boy who is starved for healthy outlets for his emotions. So the end of Season 1 is powerful, because Robin chooses his friends and family over Slade. He can be real with his friends, and he can confide in them, especially Starfire with how open she is, and Raven with how much she understands his feelings. Slade is a strangling prison, and his friends are a safe embrace. Both are a type of structure, but only one helps Robin grow. When I was interviewing one of the show's fans, he brought up that one of his favorite episodes was with Robin after Season 1, the episode Haunted.
It is the episode where the Titans have to make Robin realize that he has been hallucinating Slade for that entire episode. He's been thinking he's seeing Slade and fighting Slade, and there is no Slade. Slade is not there. He has been in Robin's mind the whole time for that episode. It was really crazy, and it really brought to light the fact that Robin was so traumatized by everything that he went through with Slade that he still thinks that he's around. And he never realized that it wasn't a real thing.
Haunted is one of the darkest and most serious episodes of the series, and it's definitely one of my favorites too. Amy Wolfram had this to say about it.
We wanted to make sure that what was real to Robin was truly real to him, and that the other characters understood that. Whatever the case, it was very real to Robin, whether it's really Slade or not. I think that's true with children. If they think there's a monster under the bed, to them, there is a monster under the bed. It's real to them, so we wanted to address that.
While Robin grew and learned from his experiences in Season 1, the writers were also careful to show that often trauma lingers like a phantom. And sometimes people make mistakes that live with them in unexpected ways.
So what I realized was this. Red X still represents Robin, and it's a side of him that he's not proud of. So it became a meditation on the nature of good and evil and the line between them. I thought it was also a rite of passage for Robin. Part of growing up is realizing the answers aren't simple, especially to the important questions. I think in previous episodes, Robin had a pretty black and white viewpoint, so bringing back Red X tended to muddy that line for him a little more. It's all part of growing up.
Red X only has a few appearances as his own character. That's separate from Robin. But he quickly stirred up fan curiosity. Just like Slade, people wanted to know who this is. But in the show, we never learn who Red X really was under that mask. And that was by design. Glenn Murakami said that at one point they actually did come up with someone who it could be. But he told interviewers that he wasn't going to say who that was, and then he laughed. What mattered more to the creators was what Red X represented as a challenge for Robin.
It's an interesting conflict to put your character in. You have a character that has to fight himself. What happens when Robin is evenly matched? That's how I look at Red X as a character. Sometimes it's that simple. We talk about these stories in a metaphorical way. Robin has to fight himself. Sometimes it's better to say, it doesn't matter who's in the costume. I think you can't get too bogged down in the continuity of things. It gets in the way of telling good stories.
Rob Hoagie has hinted that they were thinking of revisiting Red X if they had been given more episodes. But still, they were happy with his inclusion in the story as an anti-hero figure, an encapsulation of Robin's isolating rogue tendencies. And regarding that suitcase in the episode Revved Up, you probably don't need me to tell you that they weren't ever going to give a straightforward answer. No, the writers think it's more fun for fans to speculate what was inside rather than actually just telling you. The only context we get is that Hoagie described it as something important to Robin, that is best left a secret among friends. That same fan who told me he liked the episode Haunted also said that now, as an adult, his favorite character in the show is Robin.
Just because of how much he personally changed throughout the series, from being a kind of laid-back, edgy teen, I've had a bad past, so everything's just bad, to embracing the fact that those things happen and you just have to move on and live another day. He became the overall, leader hero, which was, super cool.
One little example of how much Robin grows throughout the series is in the Season 4 episode, The Quest. He gets back from this perilous and important learning experience with a martial arts master, and when he returns home, he finds that all of his friends are dressing like him and goofing off. But instead of getting mad about it, though, he coolly replies, "You know, Robbins, the mask makes me feel cool, too." And it's like, dang, our boy Wonder is growing up and learning not to take himself too seriously. And honestly, good for him.
My dad was always a huge comics fan, and there were 4 of us kids, so when an episode would come out on Saturday night, we'd often be watching the TV, and I'd catch it. I remember not really caring much at the time, kind of uninterested at first, but then I was really into the show by the time season 2 ended over a year later. That's the first time I can remember being really excited for next week's episode, because the second to last episode ended on a major cliffhanger, with all the Titans all having been divided and conquered by Terra, and suddenly at the end, there they were, alive and well and regrouping for an all-out showdown. I had very strong feelings about Terra. I still do, even if I've come to understand the nuances better than I did at age 10, and I've softened a little bit towards her, but I still couldn't wait to see how they'd deal with her.
Season 2 continues the serious tone in the main story, with another character becoming Slade's apprentice. This time it's a new character, Terra. She's only in a handful of episodes of the series, but somehow the creators, especially Amy Wolfram, managed to make her one of the most compelling, challenging, and nuanced characters in Teen Titans. According to Glenn Murakami, they had wanted Terra to appear more. She was supposed to be in episodes outside of her main arc, and he had even wanted to incorporate her into the title sequence. He felt that that would have made it feel like she was more a part of the group, and it also would have made her betrayal all the more shocking. However, they ran out of time, and that's sometimes how making a TV show can go. Comic book fans might be quick to tell you that this version of Terra and the events that play out on the show have been toned down significantly from the original source material. In the Judas contract arc from 1984, Terra is clearly evil, and she's also physically involved with Slade in ways that are very disconcerting and not okay. Thankfully, the show doesn't go that route at all, and outside of age-appropriateness reasons, the cartoon version of Terra also works so well because she feels very human and real. That isn't to say that the Terra arc in the show doesn't have its own difficult and controversial aspects. It is one of the most emotionally straining and complex arcs of the whole series.
Lately, I've been thinking back to the Disney movies we grew up with, and they're really dark. There's some really dark and scary stuff that happens there, and I don't think it's a terrible thing for children to be scared by something they see on TV, because that's how we learn to deal with being scared. It'd be a bad thing if there was a generation that didn't know how to handle being scared. But writing the scenes with Slade and Robin and Slade and Terra is one thing, but seeing the animation, it's a grown man beating up a teenager. So there's definitely moments where you go, whoa, that's intense.
Terra is the girl who can't control her emotions. The girl who feels her life is unstable and as a result clings on to someone older who can promise her that control and stability. With the Titans, she could have healthier relationships, but those relationships can be risky. If she opens up, she could get hurt, and perhaps in her eyes even worse, or even more likely, they could get hurt. So she turns to a toxic relationship with Slade. And since the show does away with the sexual implications of the comic books, the focus here is instead on the psychological appeal in allying with Slade. It reminds me of why someone might be led into a cult. The promise of certainty from someone with so much confidence. The freedom of letting someone else make all of the tough decisions. If Terra feels that she's just gonna mess everything up, she might start to believe that abdicating all of her choices to this older, wiser man might be for the best. Raven is the most initially distrustful of Terra. And part of it could be that Raven is magic and she can sense things. Sure. But I think it probably has more to do with how similar Terra is to Raven. Both of them have this internal conflict when it comes to regulating their emotions. Both worry that their powers could end up hurting people that they care about. That's why Raven spends all that time alone in her room, reflecting on her emotions, practicing meditation as a form of self-care and self-regulation. But Terra doesn't know the techniques that Raven has learned, and she doesn't have a support system of friends like Raven does. Terra is a ticking time bomb, not because she's forever doomed to hurt everyone around her over and over again, but because she's an at-risk youth. She doesn't have a foundation or rock. She's always walking on shaky ground. And then I got to wondering, what does Tara see in Beast Boy specifically? Because I don't think the show ever 100% confirms this. I'm going to launch into a bit of speculation. First off, for those not entrenched in the Teen Titans fandom, one of the most popular and enduring ships has been Beast Boy and Raven. And I think part of the reason why that ship works for people, aside from admittedly how nice the colors green and purple look together, is that Beast Boy is so emotionally open and sincere. For someone like Raven or Tara, who have difficulty trusting other people, Beast Boy is someone who doesn't harbor secrets, and he barely pretends to be anything he's not. Over the years, Beast Boy has learned to respond to his own insecurities by using humor as a defense mechanism. Making people smile and laugh is his way of finding belonging and masking his own uncertainty. I think Raven sees through that. I think Raven perceives that Beast Boy isn't actually as stoic as he pretends to be. But I don't think Tara can see past the image. No, I think Tara genuinely believes that Beast Boy isn't bothered by things, that he doesn't have big fears or doubts. He probably seems strong. Everything washes over him, and he just laughs it off. When she starts to think that Beast Boy told the others she couldn't control her powers, I think the betrayal got magnified. Beast Boy was simultaneously someone she felt comfortable with, enough to let her guard down, while at the same time, someone who exemplified all of the strengths that she wished she had. Beast Boy, in the comics, is also known as the Changeling. No matter what he changes into, he's always the same, always himself. And that is a kind of stability. Tara's arc has this recurring motif of reflections. Beast Boy, channeling his inner Nirvana fan, gives her a heart-shaped box, which in turn reflects her image in the glass. Tara looks at her reflection twice in the diner, once in a spoon and next at the window where Slade is. And the climax of the episode Betrayal takes place in a hall of mirrors. Tara is the girl who doesn't like what she sees in the mirror because she is hyper-aware that what she sees in herself isn't what other people see in her. And the more Beast Boy and Robin and Starfire and Cyborg believe in her, the more that gap widens, and the more that dissonance looms large. At least Slade doesn't expect good things out of her. He expects her to be exactly how she sees herself, a walking disaster who harms other people and is a weapon to be wielded.
I think the very important thing with Tara was to drag you back and forth with her, to make you like her. Then you hate her. Then you like her again. Then we make you hate her again. Because Tara is the bad friend. The kid you know that, well, something isn't right there. Something's going on. I was looking at the last pass of the final script, just bawling my eyes out. I mean, she's just lost. Something inside her hurts so bad that right and wrong don't matter anymore. And I think the best told stories stick to your ribs. That you find yourself thinking about them later on. The key is to give enough so the story makes sense, but not enough that you tell them everything. I think everybody I know knows somebody who got lost in life. Somebody that couldn't hang on like the rest of us could. And they'd get involved with bad people or drugs or whatever. Whether Tara is or isn't evil, I cared about her. I was sad to see her go. I think Tara's story is a story about responsibility. I think Tara doesn't feel responsibility for anything she does. As a result, she feels very out of control. She feels like she needs somebody else to be in charge of her. In the end, she finally does take charge. Whether or not she was actually a good person or an evil person, I think she finally resolved whatever was plaguing her. She finally found some real spine and real courage.
Real control doesn't come from the outside. It's not some authoritarian hand pushing you around. Real control is internal. It's self-awareness, accountability, and action. I'll have more to say about this when I get to Season 5 and the show's finale, Things Change. All I will say right now is that there are a lot of Terras in real life, and their stories matter. David Slack referred to Season 3 as a lighter arc. When compared to Robin and Terra's abusive relationships with Slade, and what was about to come in Season 4 with Raven's demon father, I guess the literal cult leader is a lighter and less uncomfortable threat.
Instead of the villain who was in the shadows, he was going to be very flamboyant, and he wanted to be in the spotlight, and he liked being a villain. He liked being in control of the Hive Academy. So that was the take we had with Brother Blood.
With Season 3 came some challenges for the creators. The first 2 seasons had both dealt with Slade and him wanting an apprentice. Now, the trick had worked twice, but they needed something new. Glenn Murakami would later admit that he didn't really think the Brother Blood arc ended up working. He says he was already burnt out after the emotionally charged Terra arc, and I suspect that he might not have been the only one on the team facing that level of strain and creative frustration.
We wanted to do Brother Blood, but we couldn't do Brother Blood as a cult leader who hangs out in a pool of blood. We were afraid he'd be too similar to Slade. I think it was David who said we shouldn't do another guy who hides in the shadows, says short, scary lines. So we made Brother Blood more flamboyant. He craves the spotlight. He likes being a supervillain, whereas Slade is a loner who keeps to himself. I felt as the character went on, he became more like Dracula. That kind of worked for me. He became a very difficult character to figure out. There were a number of things we couldn't do with him, things that wouldn't be appropriate for a 6 to 11-year-old cartoon. We weren't trying to water down the character, so maybe it didn't quite work. I didn't feel I had a great handle on who Brother Blood was.
Another challenge was the Titans East. Sam Register wanted this second team to be a big part of the show, but Murakami and the writers only planned for it to have as much involvement as it ended up having. Murakami specifically felt like sometimes they were doing a spin-off show whenever they made those Titans East episodes, because they were detouring so far from their strong core 5 characters.
It's tricky when you bring in a second team. You want them to be cool, but you don't want them to be so cool the audience goes, "Wait, I want to watch a show about them now!" So you have to keep the 5 Titans the coolest.
While the original Titans passed the squint test, the writing team had difficulty making the Titans East stand out. It was hard for them to make Speedy and Aqualad not too much like Robin. The voice cast helped. David Slack specifically thinks that was the case for Aqualad. But I'd be lying if I said I ever thought of Speedy as anything other than discount Robin. And the third challenge, when it came to making Season 3, is a bit more difficult to parse out. It has to deal with the focus character for the main story arc. He's not necessarily unpopular or disliked, but he also, at the same time, was not as much of a fan favorite as Robin, Raven, or Beast Boy.
I think a lot of people don't like Cyborg. I think the problem is he comes across as being one note. I saw him as the kid who suddenly got a man's body. He basically went through puberty overnight. He went from being a teenager to being the biggest kid to being the most powerful. So he didn't quite know how his body worked. But we didn't get into that too much. And then when we did, the character sometimes came across as whiny. We talked about the Thing a lot. We didn't want him to complain that he was a robot all the time.
Cyborg is the oldest Titan on the team and definitely one of the most balanced and mature. And I'm not sure if that landed for everyone. Cyborg could be a serious and dramatic character, but he wasn't ever as cool and edgy as Robin or Raven. Cyborg could also be a comedic funny character with his waffles, but he wasn't ever as consistently goofy as Beast Boy or Starfire. Cyborg always existed in the middle of things. Because he was the oldest, Murakami posited that Cyborg could be the first to leave the group. When Sam Register was pushing for Titans East, I'm not sure if Cyborg leading them was always part of the conversation, but it does make sense from a practical standpoint as well as from a character standpoint. Every one of the Titans is an outcast. Robin is an orphan, and the most stable adult in his life for years was a man who dressed up as a bat and fought crime during the night. Beast Boy has been looking for a sense of belonging since way back in his Doom Patrol years. Raven has multi-dimensional demon prophecies working against her, and Starfire is literally from another planet. That leaves Cyborg, who is an outcast because of his body. By every other account, Cyborg is the least unusual member of the group. He is a dude who loves sports and fixing up cars. He likes video games and has a big personality. When he's happy, he's really happy. And when he's mad, he's really mad. But it's not like he has to worry about his emotions destroying a town. No, he was on track to live a pretty normal life. But then one day, everything changed. And due to things outside of his control, due to a freak accident, his life would never be normal again.
There's that relationship that Cyborg has with the kids that have prosthetics. The cool thing about some of his parts was something we heard from a parent. Her son had a friend at school who was diabetic, and when he told his mother, he mentioned he's just like Cyborg. So we had given this kid a way to understand his friend. Just because he had diabetes, it didn't mean there was anything wrong with him. So that was really cool.
Cyborg never chose to be this way. The same way that people don't choose to be diabetic or need prosthetics. He feels this real dread about becoming a machine, like in the episode Some of His Parts. And obviously, the fear of becoming fully robot is not something that a lot of people, whether children or adults, can relate to. But what is relatable is that feeling of not wanting to be seen as, or defined by, only one part of who you are. Cyborg needs to be aware of his limitations, and know what he can't do that other people can do. But the flip side is also true. He needs to know his strengths and ultimately find value in the totality of who he is.
The most important thing was to do a show about interesting characters who just so happened to have superpowers. We tried to show both the upside and downside to those powers. Like with Cyborg, kids ask, why am I too tall? Why am I too short? I think those are human traits. I thought that was the best way to interpret the material. Not everyone is 100% happy with themselves.
When someone is perceived as being different in some way, sometimes other people feel scared or threatened by that difference. Others, by contrast, are like Fix-It and Brother Blood, who end up treating that difference as somehow special, something that makes this person better than everyone else. Both perspectives, whether you're demonizing or idolizing that difference, end up reducing the person to only that difference, to only what makes them different, and as a result, miss the whole picture. Cyborg's story throughout the entire series is also about knowing his limitations, knowing that he can't do everything. David Slack pointed out that using Billy Numerous in the episode Overdrive kinda nailed that point home. You can't be everything everywhere all at once. You'll only end up spreading yourself too thin.
It was now about trying to do too much, which seemed to fit with Cyborg's personality. He's someone that loves life too much. It's conceivable he would want to do it all. So we addressed another problem with kids today. Many of them are overbooked. They have school, after-school activities, things on the weekends, and trying to watch Teen Titans on the weekends. All their hours are accounted for.
Season 3 is not my favorite season. It really never has been. I've never cared about the Titans East, even when I was a kid, and I don't have much to say about them. Brother Blood works as an evil schoolmaster or principal, but he never was a hit like Slade. All in all, this is the main story arc that's the most meh to me. But the writers gave Cyborg a chance to go to school and feel normal again. David Slack describes it as, quote, Cyborg essentially goes back to a time before his accident where he's able to have friends and be an athlete. And I think that was important to Cyborg, to have those experiences. But what's most important, I think, was that he was able to step away from it. There's a certain kind of comfort that comes from feeling quote-unquote normal, but it's not the real you. Really belonging isn't blending in and fitting in. Really belonging is when you're with the people who let you be you, warts and differences and eccentricities and all. And I think, by the end of Season 3, Cyborg realized he didn't have to leave his home and friends to find that feeling. he already had it.
When I say that, like, Raven was my favorite, I feel like she was everybody's favorite. I feel like there were a lot of, like, goth tweens online at the time who, like, connected with Raven and, you know, were posting angsty stuff on LiveJournal about, like, how they connected with Raven. But for me, like, it was a little different. I feel like, I don't know, I didn't like Raven just because everyone else liked Raven, if that makes sense.
Raven is definitely my favorite. I relate a lot to her, and I find her origin story really intriguing.
If I'm being honest, my favorite part of the series is Raven, closely followed by how adamantly the show sticks to the theme of found family and dearly loving your friends. Explaining why I'm so attached to Raven gets pretty dark and personal, but let's just say I was a loner who didn't really have any role models in my life. And when I saw Raven going through some of the same things I struggled with, maybe not exactly the same, but similar enough to find parallels in every direction, I was really encouraged. And seeing her triumph over those things gave me a lifeline. It gave me a safe space to process my struggles, and seeing the next episode gave me something to look forward to. As a kid struggling with undiagnosed and thus untreated mental illness, having something to look forward to literally saved my life. Seeing Raven triumph over her struggles, finding friends that love her even if they don't always understand her, overcoming everything in her life that predisposed her to be bitter or horrible or evil, gave me a lot of hope and reassurance that there was something out there for me too, that I would find my place in the world with people who love me for who I am.
To say that Raven was popular is an understatement. She appeared at the exact right moment for a lot of tiny emo kids and edgy teens during the early 2000s. And from what I've heard, the strong reception for her in the show also boosted her resurgence in the comic books. Raven's main arc is in Season 4, but the writers had already given her some great development before that. One of the fan-favorite episodes of Season 1 is Nevermore, which is the first episode dedicated directly to Raven, and also one of the first episodes where it really felt like the writers had nailed the tone.
When Glenn and I were talking about it, he mentioned, well, if the story is about them getting to know Raven better, shouldn't they just go inside of her head? And that just cracked the whole thing wide open. That was my first undiluted taste of Glenn's genius. He approached things from this utterly unique standpoint and creates from a sense of internal emotional logic. From then on, the episode got really interesting to work on.
Nevermore was also the audience's first impression of Trigon, who'd grow into the main antagonist of Season 4. Unlike Slade, I feel like Trigon in the show is less of a developed personality on his own, and more a distillation of a nightmare. Slade is a man. Brother Blood is a man who wanted to be a god, and Trigon is a god, presiding all-knowing and all-powerful on his throne, more a living embodiment of the concept of authority than a real character. But to Raven, he was always the biggest threat. Raven was born with a prophecy that one day, on her birthday, she would be a portal through which Trigon would enter her world and lay waste to the earth. It was the heavy weight Raven always carried, that one day she would end the world, and all she could do in the meantime was try to hold back that power, hold Trigon back for as long as she could manage. What Beast Boy and Cyborg learn from going inside Raven's mind, and what Starfire learns when their bodies and powers are swapped in the episode Switched, is that Raven does have strong emotions. She may act quiet and low energy, but inside, she still feels everything. Raven can be happy and feel bursts of energy. She can be afraid or lazy. She can be brave and full of rage. Raven feels love and loves her friends dearly. But the moment she gives in to those strong emotions, the moment she gets swept up in it, that's the moment it can throw off her balance and cause trouble for herself and for others. Beast Boy might see it as creepy. Starfire might take a while to understand why it's important, but Raven needs that time alone. Probably more than any of the other Titans, Raven has done a lot of introspection and knows herself. It's where a lot of her maturity comes from, and a lot of her perspective. But when you're the weird kid, when you feel like you have to put up walls so other people don't get hurt or so that you don't get hurt, there comes the loneliness. Just because someone needs to be alone sometimes doesn't mean they like feeling lonely. Raven thrives on solitude, but if she's truly alone, that's when the fear sets in. It's also why I think the episode Spellbound is important. Raven finds a spirit living in one of her tomes, and then she bonds with that dark and misunderstood entity, finds that she can relate to it, only until she finds out, too late, that this person wasn't really like her, wasn't someone trying to keep a monster out. He was the monster trying to get out. David Slack described it as an episode about the first bad boyfriend, where the book is like an internet chat room, and Malchior is someone pretending to be something he's not. Part of what makes Raven so compelling is that she's strong. Even before her main character arc in Season 4, she always had endurance and ways to cope. She could forgive her friends when they crossed boundaries. She could explain her needs and wants, while also being open to the give and take of trying new things outside of her comfort zone with her friends to help meet their needs and their wants too. And when she's vulnerable and hurt by Malchior, Raven doesn't hide away forever. Instead, she embraces the people who genuinely care for her and make her feel less alone. So when the viewers see how much Trigon scares her, I think it hits harder. Raven is strong, and yet even she is afraid of Trigon. Not just because Trigon is powerful, which he is, but because he represents scary things.
My favorite arc is the Season 4 arc where a prophecy Raven's been dreading all her life comes true. Her father comes to end the world, and even though it reverts her to a child in the process, she still manages to take her power back and banish him, saving the world in the process, of course. My relationship with my parental figures is complicated, let's put it that way. And that episode where she said that line blew my mind. You may have created me, but you were never my father. Fathers are kind. Fathers protect you. Fathers raise you. I was protected by the monks of Azarath, and I was raised by my friends. They are my family. This is my home, and you are not welcome here. Though it wasn't my father that line brought to mind, I took the concept of defying someone who thought they had control over you and applied it to someone who had been emotionally cruel to me for years at that point. And it felt so incredibly validating to finally see that you don't have to put up with someone treating you horribly, and you can take your power back.
I think the whole story of Raven became a metaphor about the fear of growing up, among other things. Most people I knew when we were kids were excited about growing up. There was an excitement about being old enough to do various things, but there was also this fear. You have to get a job and have responsibilities. You can't play in the afternoons anymore. And the even greater fear, maybe you wouldn't even want to play in the afternoons anymore. So I think Raven's fear was centered around this fear that she would grow up to be like her father. And I think that it's a metaphor that does resonate quite strongly for a lot of people. Most of us, no matter how much we love our parents, wouldn't choose to be just like them. And unfortunately, someone with a bad parent carries that sense of legacy, that fear you will grow up to be like them. The metaphor is clear in Raven's speech to Trigon. Sometimes your parent is someone who you want to grow up to be. And other times, that parent may just be someone who helped to bring you into this world. And sometimes your family are your friends. The people who take care of you. Not necessarily anyone you are biologically connected to. That may be too philosophical for a kid's cartoon show, but it's there anyway.
The reason Raven stops time in the episode Birthmark, according to David Slack, is that it represents how she is running from the fears she doesn't want to face. He thinks it was Amy Wolfram who came up with that idea, and I'd believe it. Perhaps you could also link that to all the people being turned to stone. Frozen in place, unable to move forward, stuck between fight and flight. And there's a certain irony. If you're so afraid of being trapped by a fate that you freeze up in fear, by doing nothing about it, you're the one binding yourself to a destiny. Raven is strong, but even someone strong is afraid sometimes and needs support. When Trigon's forces are winning, when defeat seems imminent, her friends still fight for her even after she's already given up. Beast Boy even transforms back into the were-creature, a form he had taken in the past to protect Raven in the episode The Beast Within. And it's Robin who reaches his hand out. Robin who didn't see inside her mind or switch powers with her. Robin who might have understood where she was because he had been in dark places. He's lived with fears, obsessions, and regrets. And he's known what it's like to give up on yourself, only for your friends to still be there for you. It's the child Raven that he is able to reach, the part of Raven that feels the weakest, the smallest, and has the most shattered sense of trust. Robin has to remind her of who she is, wake her up from this nightmare, and believe in her that she can rise through this.
Well, I didn't want it to depict a complete lack of hope. That's one of the great things about the Titans and young people in general. You can have an adult say, "This is an impossible situation with absolutely no way out." And any kid will just say, "Well, I'm gonna try anyway." They don't know the meaning of giving up in that type of situation. Here, the world is taken over by Trigon and it's now flame and ashes. But as long as there's one glimmer of hope, these guys are going to go for it. And that's what I love about these characters, especially Robin. He's such a tenacious character. He's even going to team up with his worst enemy to make sure his friend is safe.
Trigon is defeated, and Season 4 ends on a strong, high note. Behind the scenes, Murakami decides that they couldn't take the Titans back to where they'd been.
It's like, when the Titans defeated Trigon, they graduated. When they started out, they weren't quite superheroes, but after Trigon, they proved themselves as superheroes. So we wanted to take them into a bigger world and face a problem that was big. And I know some viewers didn't like that, but I felt our characters needed change. They needed growth. I think after 4 seasons of seeing the group together as a team, we could split them up a bit. We all agreed it would be interesting to take the characters out of their element.
And thus began development for Season 5, the final season, and the one that would change everything. According to Rob Hoagie, the team was told that they were going to get 20 episodes for Season 5. In the seasons before that, they'd only previously had 13. So the team got ambitious. Hoagie, Wolfram, Slack, and Murakami mapped out the whole season. And then, after they had everything planned, then they were told that, no, you're actually only going to have 13 again. Which resulted in what Hoagie described as serious modifications to the scope of Season 5. Members of the team, for sure at least Hoagie and Murakami, started to emphasize that this season was when the Teen Titans were going global. Wolfram spoke about how it would encompass the themes of young versus old, how the new Brotherhood of Evil would set out to destroy every young hero, and the Teen Titans would never be able to go back home because they'd be constantly on missions all around the world, split up from each other, all in the efforts to save these new young superheroes. But I never liked Season 5. Not as a kid and not now as an adult. There are some good episodes, don't get me wrong, but it is my least favorite story arc. The Brain is the least compelling villain in the series for me. As a friend of mine put it, if Trigon was the devil, the Brain is the dirty bubble. The push for more and more new, less developed hero characters was the Titans East from Season 3 all over again, but this time on a much bigger scale.
Sam always wants more characters. And the network always wants more characters, but it works out very well in expanding the world, which helps make the show more exciting. It also gives the toy companies more characters to play with.
We wanted Season 5 to be bigger, better, more characters, more action, more adventures, and the best way to do that is to add more characters.
Rob Hoagie describes how everyone in the crew was involved in compiling this massive list of every possible Titan and Titans-related character that they could find. They went through old issues and guidebooks and ended up with what he called an ultra-long laundry list of every possible character they could include. They sent it to DC Comics, got back a list of who was approved, and then used just about every character that was on that list. And while I get the potential enthusiasm, I think this ultimately led to a bloated cast of characters that we didn't get enough time to really know. I think it goes back to what FocusedShadow was saying earlier about why Justice League hadn't appealed to her.
Season 5 almost didn't even have an arc, or like the whole season was one, continuous arc. So yeah, I feel like there could have been more adapting, some of the Tamaran stories, stuff like that. There was Titans East, and then there was in season 5, there were literally all these like honorary Titans. It just the cast got too big, and I wasn't interested. And even though I knew something about the 80s comics, and so there was this cool element of like, oh, they're going to adapt so-and-so, and put them in the show. Like, that was cool for like 2 minutes, but I kind of liked the main 5, especially Raven. So I was like, I want to watch the Teen Titans. I don't want to watch these other people while the Teen Titans are away. Like, it was very like, shows with like a huge ensemble cast are more popular. I'm thinking again of shows like Game of Thrones, where there were like literally hundreds of like so many different storylines at once. With kids, you have those. I remember like David Slack using the word iconic. Like, you have your characters, like, and this is your show. Like, it's always going to be about those characters, if that makes sense.
I think a lot of people were like, these stories suck, but we were building an arc. I thought it all came together in the end. I thought it was cool. We felt like the audience grew up with these characters, and I didn't want it to get boring. I mean, it seemed like we were starting every episode with some emergency at Titan's Tower, and then Beast Boy would do some goofy bit involving food. Then they get called on a mission. I felt we were getting a bit formulaic. I liked season 5 because we shook the stable ground the Titans were on. We put them on unstable ground. We kept putting them in environments and situations they hadn't been in before, splitting them up, and I think by doing that, we saw some sides of the characters that we hadn't seen before. I'm proud of the 5th season. Those are the kind of stories we wanted to tell.
With David Slack working on the direct-to-video movie Trouble in Tokyo, a lot of the work on Season 5 was divided between Wolfram and Hoagie, with Murakami as the main one advocating the Brotherhood of Evil and the Doom Patrol be used, since he was a fan of both.
Early on, when I was asked what cartoons I would like to work on, I answered Teen Titans. And when they asked me what other DC properties I was interested in, I answered Doom Patrol. Once again, I thought they were characters who were really interesting, stuff that hadn't been done before. We showed the Doom Patrol as sort of cynical and jaded superheroes. I thought that showed what the Titans might become if they aren't careful. That was interesting to me, and then having Beast Boy recognize that.
And I can see some of the potential. The Doom Patrol are like this adult version of the Teen Titans, and as Hoagie has pointed out in an interview, their old school way of doing things shows some interesting contrasts. I also think this season ended up doing a lot for Beast Boy, even beyond the development he got from Season 2 with the Terra arc. From what Hoagie has said, it wasn't even their original plan to make Season 5 into a Beast Boy season. It just kinda happened.
I think it shed an interesting light on who Beast Boy is. The class clown of the Titans actually comes from a strict military family. That his dad demands a great amount of discipline. I thought that made Beast Boy's levity all the more interesting.
He was a father figure, but he was also a very stern father, and he was also a very, you do what I say, don't veer from it. He was more missions first, nothing else matters.
No matter what it takes. That was the oath the Doom Patrol swore, Beast Boy.
Season 5 is about Beast Boy in many ways. It starts off with him and his family, and it ends with him and his family in a different way.
Around this time, there was a series of official comic books being published called Teen Titans Go. Not to be confused with the show later called Teen Titans Go or the comic run that would be based on that. I'm still reading these comics right now, and I'm on issue 34, but there's this great moment in one of the earlier issues that goes a bit into Beast Boy's childhood with the Doom Patrol. Elastigirl was his mother figure, and sometimes when he was really young, he'd refuse to go to sleep at his bedtime. Like a lot of kids do. And sometimes what he'd do when he was told that he had to go to bed is he would turn into a frog. And so Elastigirl would pick him up, carry him as a frog to his bed, lean over and kiss him goodnight, and say, "Good night, Prince Charming." And then he'd change back to normal, and he'd reply while settling into his bed, "Good night, fair maiden." And then he'd go to sleep. And right away, as soon as Elastigirl shares this story, Mento accuses her of having babied him too much, that the boy needed discipline and direction. Elastigirl counters that Mento was too strict, that Beast Boy also needed affirmation and affection. So all of a sudden, a lot of Beast Boy's character just clicks into place, between what we get in the show and little snippets like that in the comics. He's insecure and constantly seeking attention, in large part because his first found family was so dysfunctional and uneven. A father who was only order, and a mother who was only affirmation, but with no proper balance.
More than anything, Beast Boy wants to know that he's cool, and he doesn't know that he is. So he's kind of all about getting that affirmation. He's always trying to make people laugh.
See? She thinks I'm funny. Statistically, I suppose someone has to.
When an interviewer brought up to Glenn Murakami the idea that the whole series could be viewed as Beast Boy growing up, this is what Murakami had to say.
Well, he's the youngest character, so you learn the most through his eyes. I also like that Beast Boy started out as being similar to Robin. He was a sidekick and he was very serious. And then he realized he should lighten up. We also talked about Beast Boy being a military brat. As a kid, he moved around a lot. He didn't have friends. He didn't really have a home. So that's why he takes to the Titans so much. So it's like a family, and that's his home. So all throughout the 5th season, it's Beast Boy that doesn't want to split up. It's Beast Boy that wants to go home. He's always been through all that, traveling the world with the Doom Patrol, being obsessed about fighting the Brotherhood of Evil. And then you have Robin turning into Mento. That was the parallel.
And now that we're this far into the video, I'll throw my beans into the pile and say that, yeah, Beast Boy is my favorite Teen Titans character, and he always has been. I think it goes a bit beyond just that green was my favorite color, and still is, and that I love Peridot from Steven Universe 2. But no, I think it runs a bit deeper than that. I came from a dysfunctional family where I didn't have a consistent, healthy male role model for most of my childhood. I was also insecure, and I probably used humor as a defense mechanism. I always sought attention, always wanted to talk, always wanted to be part of the group, but I never knew quite what to say or how to fit in, so I ended up a lot of times just being the butt of the jokes. And to a 4th or 5th grade kid who already wanted to be a vegetarian, the representation factor with Beast Boy was huge. I didn't know any actual vegetarians personally, so seeing Beast Boy on TV helped normalize for me that lifestyle choice and that code of ethics. It was so affirming, since I lived in a very meat and potatoes part of the world. In middle school, I became the goofy and naive guy who would hang out with the emo kids. I was somehow both more mature and less mature than others my age. And I could read a lot more into this and go on, but this isn't therapy, this is a YouTube video. Yet I will say that I was crushed by what happened to Tara. And when I saw that last episode, Things Change, I mean, this show was always going to linger with me. I think it's time we talk about Things Change. While the team thought Season 5 was going to have 7 additional episodes and be 20 episodes total, according to Rob Hoagie, they had been told at the very beginning of Season 5 that this was going to be the end of the show. It gets a little more tangled and confused because later on Twitter, David Slack would say they had been planning a Season 6 when they got word of the show being canceled. But regardless, I want to push back on the notion that Things Change wasn't intended as an ending. It really sounds like most of the team knew this would be the series finale, or at least could be. And it was something Glenn Murakami had specifically really wanted and had been talking about even back in Season 3. Rob Hoagie argued that the 2-part finale with the Brotherhood was the Season 5 finale, while Things Change instead was the finale for the series as a whole.
I remember we all got together to watch a screening of the last episode, and I thought about it. We always conceived the show as a metaphor for things that would happen to kids on a playground. We used that tool a lot, using things that would be relatable to kids growing up. I think the cool thing about Things Change is that metaphor broken down, and it became, to a certain extent, kids actually on a playground. And that was a great way to end it.
I love Things Change. It is easily my favorite episode of the series, and it is among my favorite series finales of any show ever. But it's also always been extremely controversial, and it's been divisive among fans of the series ever since it aired.
Honestly, it leaves me feeling like they didn't finish the series, that they just left it open-ended. Whenever I rewatch the series, I always skip the last episode because of that.
One of the main points of criticism is that many fans have felt that the series ended on a cliffhanger, that Things Change left unresolved questions. Is Slade back now? Is this really Tara? And if it is Tara, why doesn't she remember what happened?
The character's name is not Tara. Nowhere in that script is the name Tara written. The character is named Schoolgirl. I have my own opinion on what's going on, but I didn't want to spell out if she came back and why she came back and how she came back or why she didn't want to be a superhero. I think people are expecting us to answer how Tara came back, or what's in Robin's briefcase, or who Red X is, and all that. We were never going to sum it all up and put a nice bow on it, but I think it's fun for fans to fill in some of those blanks themselves, like who triggered Slade's mask in Haunted. I think that's a good thing.
Glenn Murakami, who said the anime His and Her Circumstances was an influence for him on the episode, has argued that the show was always about changing and shifting gears, and for him, it was a good ending to Tara's storyline.
I think the thing people don't realize about Tara is she wasn't cut out to be a superhero. She had superpowers, but she wasn't cut out for that. And that's what makes her a tragic character. And I think that's what makes that character interesting. It's hard to explain that sort of thing to people. Like, some characters are born to die. And that doesn't mean we don't like that character. That's the lesson of that character.
I've seen arguments about whether or not it was a cliffhanger, but I'm on the team that feels it was very much a cliffhanger. Any information we were given was never explained, it's left up to extrapolation and supposition, and while that can be fun in certain kinds of stories, it's incredibly out of character for this show. I've never felt closure for what happened to Tara. I still don't know what they were implying. Did she have her memories? Was she choosing to avoid Beast Boy? I'm even concerned now, ignoring everything traumatic in your life isn't a good way to cope with it, you know? How's she handling it having come out of that experience? Because I don't know if she was aware or not while she was a statue, but I imagine not because she was a statue. And if that's the case, she woke up right after having nearly died. And after standing up to a manipulative, abusive man and her friends threatening to kill her. Dear gods, that ending was not the catharsis I want in a story that's so messed up. I very much like my stories to end with closure and a happy ending. I know it's not always how life goes, but that's what stories are for, helping solve the wounds life leaves you with, at least for me.
I've always viewed Things Change from Beast Boy's perspective and for what it means to me for the series' themes. But Zira brings up some great points about Tara. And I believe there's definitely good reasons to dislike Things Change or be dissatisfied with it as an ending for the whole series. So if you're watching this and you feel like the ending genuinely sucks, I hear you, and I do respect your viewpoint. But that's not going to stop me from gushing about how perfect I think this episode really is.
The whole message of that episode as a last episode was Beast Boy learning that things change and you have to move on and it can't be the way it was when you were a kid. And I was too young to understand that. For me, I was just sad. Why is the show ending? Why can't we have a season 6? I told you I liked the Tara episodes, so I was thinking, why can't Tara just come back and join the team? The point of that episode totally went over my head at the time. But now, that's the whole point. I think it perfectly fits as a series finale. Having your one character who wishes, why can't everything just go back to the way it was? And then the girl who may or may not be Tara, presenting the kind of opposing viewpoint. And again, I think because I remember reading the message boards and the episode reviews after it came out, and because most of the fandom was older than me, they understood the message of the episode. At the time I didn't. At the end of season 4, when everybody turned to stone and Raven unfroze everybody, all along I was thinking, oh, Tara's gonna get unfrozen too, and we're gonna see Tara again. So it was nice that that. We don't know if that's how she got unfrozen, but that was always my personal headcanon. That Tara's gonna come back, and she came back.
So I think the student in Things Change is Tara, the same Tara, and that she probably does remember everything that happened. I also don't have any reason to think that she lost her powers either. She almost certainly was freed from the stone at the end of Season 4 when Trigon was defeated, which means that she's had however long Season 5 is to think about these things and make her choices before she comes into contact with Beast Boy again. I think Tara decided that her way of coping and surviving was to forget and move on. She doesn't want to hurt anyone, and she doesn't want to get hurt herself. Tara's been trying to find a sense of normalcy. Maybe she spent time with Beast Boy in the episode because she still had doubts and wanted to make sure of her decision before it was final. Maybe it's because she wanted to prove to him that she's not the same person anymore. Maybe it's because Tara selfishly wanted just a few more moments with someone she cared about. But she ultimately tells Beast Boy that the girl he's looking for is only a memory. He has to move forward and accept that they're going on different paths. And if she has her memories and powers, this isn't something inevitable. This is a choice that she's making. In reality, I don't think people are ever meant to be. I think people have a lot more choice and free will than that. And I think Tara is grabbing her control and freedom, even if it means it hurts. Even if it might not be something that everyone agrees with or thinks is right. Even if it's messy. And I suggested that she still might have feelings for Beast Boy, but it's also possible she doesn't anymore, because she doesn't always have to feel the same way. She's had more time and she has a new life.
What I like about Titans is that a lot of kids can look at Beast Boy and be Beast Boy. There's something about the Titans being vague that the kids can project themselves onto the characters. I love when kids come up to me and tell me they really like a character. I like that they really relate to these characters. I think that's important to people. I think Things Change is, in a way, a reaction to fans taking it all way too seriously, or projecting too much onto the characters, like thinking, these characters have to be in a relationship, these characters have to like each other, but in real life, you just don't always get everything you want. I hope that makes sense.
I spoke with Zira, one of the show's fans who was critical of the ending, a bit more following the initial interview questions. And Z expressed further concern that Tara is making unhealthy choices if we go by Things Change. Tara is ultimately denying her reality and her past and might be falling back into unhealthy patterns. And I think Zira might be right. If you look at the series as a whole, as Tara's story and not Beast Boy's story, it does raise questions of whether there's a clear point or growth. I think Tara's complicated. I don't know by the end if she will get better, if Tara will grow up in a good way. But in real life, how many kids screw up and keep screwing up? I think in the last episode, Tara is surviving, and maybe that's where she's at right now. I don't know if Tara's happy yet, but I hope that soon she can be. And as for Beast Boy, he grew up in an unstable environment and was constantly seeking attention from others for his validation. He learned to make other people laugh and make them smile, and he never wanted the good times to end. I think Things Change is his wake-up call, that sometimes things in life won't be fair, and you can't stop it. All you can do is adapt. That's growing up. That's at the heart of Teen Titans as a series, and I think it's beautiful that Murakami and Wolfram went out of their way to make the final episode this message, not only for Beast Boy, but for the audience. So much of growing up is realizing that people are complicated and imperfect, that no one really has it figured out. People are constantly shifting, and your emotions will get hurt sometimes. People will leave you. They will break up with you, they will end the friendship, they will simply stop talking to you one day, they will move, they will raise a family or get jobs or get too busy. Sometimes people die. Sometimes people live on without you and are actually better and happier because they left you. Sometimes they're wrong and sometimes they're right. Sometimes these are choices, and sometimes tragedy just happens. And these are things you can't control. Things change. Will Wheaton, the voice of Aqualad, said in his podcast that there had been a meeting where a bunch of shows had to repitch their ideas, no matter if they'd had 3 episodes or if they'd been on for 5 or 10 years. This correlates a bit with Rob Hoagie's account, that apparently Sam Register at Cartoon Network had proposed rebranding the Teen Titans series, Wolfram and Murakami had followed Register's lead and submitted this proposal, and it was declined. There's been a lot of dispute about why Teen Titans was canceled. It appears it was still popular, but at 5 seasons it was already long enough that maybe running reruns was more profitable than continuing to produce new episodes. Will Wheaton also thought that Teen Titans merch would have continued to make money and didn't think canceling the show made much sense at all. Jay Torres, the writer for the original Teen Titans Go comics, said in a chat interview that they all thought there was going to be a season 6. Slade was going to return, either in the next season or in a direct-to-video movie. Rob Hoagie was one of the hopefuls that thought maybe Teen Titans could continue through direct-to-video installments. If Trouble in Tokyo sold well, maybe they could get another movie and just keep going that route, as it seemed Warner Bros. Animation and DC were looking more at standalone animated movies for the future. And he did clarify that it was Cartoon Network who canceled the show, not Warner Bros. Or DC. Now, suppose we lived in an alternate world where Register had succeeded, and the proposal from Murakami and Wolfram had been accepted. What would this rebranded Teen Titans series have looked like? Amy Wolfram says that they would have expanded on the characters introduced in Season 5, and there would be Titans towers all over the world. For example, Argent would have a tower in London. There would still be the core 5 Teen Titans, but there'd also be more and more of the other characters as well, and the whole world would open up. It would, very fittingly, have been called New Teen Titans. There would have been 24 main characters, incorporating the main Teen Titans, the Titans East, some from Season 5, as well as some new ones they'd be introducing. Phobia was going to be there, and even Slade's daughter, Rose Wilson, was slated to appear as Ravager. Character designer Derek Wyatt behind the scenes was pushing for them to use Honeybun and Mr. Twister. They were talking about the Ant. Murakami wanted to return to Thunder and Lightning and bring back Red Star. The team talked about turning Speedy into Arsenal. There's a lot of character speculation and a sense of the series' global scope, but details on what the plot would have actually been like, it's pretty scarce. Derek Wyatt suggested that the story was going to involve the dimension where the monster from Things Change came from. But that's all I really was able to find. I think fans of Season 5 would have found a lot to like in this show, and perhaps it would have given a chance for some of that season's characters, like Argent, to really shine and develop. But for anyone who wanted the show to stay focused on the main team, I don't think the new Teen Titans would have really felt right. For how much fans over the years have wanted a Season 6, I don't actually know if that approach would have resonated with most of us. When I say fans have wanted a Season 6, I mean they fought for it. There were petitions, letter writing campaigns, staff members urging fans to buy the Trouble in Tokyo DVDs in order to show their interest. But it didn't change anyone's minds, and now it's nearly 20 years later.
I always saw frontrunners talking about how they wanted to do a Starfire season, and I would have loved to see that. I would have enjoyed learning more about Raven, of course. I always did wonder what the cartoon creators were thinking when they had her mother say, "You always had the love of your people," because that is very much not how it went in the comics. In those books, people feared and hated her mercilessly. I want to know what that means so much, and I very much would have liked to see more closure with Tara. And I really, really love Jericho's character in the comics. I would have loved to see more with him. He's the son of the biggest villain in the entire series. Look me in the eye and tell me there's not a whole season arc right there.
When Season 6 speculation is brought up, it often turns to Starfire. She is the glaring omission. Every other core member had a main arc. Beast Boy even had 2 if you consider Season 2 and Season 5. But Starfire never got that.
Several times we talked about doing a Starfire story. We would talk about these really cool Starfire moments, but then it would get absorbed in a storyline. Rob talked about doing an Omega Men story, and we were thinking about Starfire going home and tying the Omega Men to it, but every time we talked about doing a Starfire arc, it would get absorbed into a story. To tell you the truth, when I was a kid, I never liked when the Titans went into space. I think they went into space at the same time that the X-Men went into space. I think it just seemed like those storylines went on so long. I remember thinking as a kid, gee, I wish they weren't in space so long. that might have been the other reason why I didn't want to do a big intergalactic epic. I think the Titans worked best as Earthbound teenagers. I think you can't really take that and continue into space.
If they had gone forward with a Starfire season, Rob Hoagie's idea was to have her go back home and realize that she had changed because of her time on Earth, and now she was an outsider even among other Tamaranians. And I think that potentially could have worked. Murakami also reasoned that they never underutilized Starfire, because she had episodes throughout the seasons. They'd used most of the story ideas they had with her as the show went on, so even if it wasn't one single clear focused arc like the others had, she was always present and always developed. I feel that as a result, Starfire might be my pick for the character that changes the least over the course of the story. But even as I say that, I think Starfire's a great character. Her anxieties about being an outsider and about being perceived as strange or wrong are so relatable and interesting. And she's also such an important member for the team.
When I was a kid and I was like, I told you, like, I was in trouble at school a lot. I was really hot-tempered, and like I would get in like arguments with teachers and stuff and get in trouble. And like with Raven, she was always like, it was always talking about like controlling your emotions, and like there was this ideal of like, oh man, if Raven can do it, then I can do it too. I never was quite as successful as her. But like now that I'm older, it's like the opposite. I'm very like honest and like saying however I feel. You know, I'm an adult, so I'm not gonna like get in trouble. And if I'm really happy over something or like really sad, I can just express that. And I feel like that's what Starfire was to the team. She was like the heart of the team, where like she was the most open about, like, she never hid anything. I feel like I noticed Starfire more, you know, when I rewatched the episodes as an adult.
There's two episodes that always jump out at me when I think of Starfire. First and foremost is Transformation, which borrows the imagery of FLCL to portray Starfire's pimple and how it sends her on a quest to understand her changing body. It's an obvious allegory for puberty and the fears that come with it, but it's done so well, and I think it really captures some of the horrors of adolescence in a way that I haven't really seen a lot of other media quite articulate. And the second episode is How Long Is Forever, when Starfire is sent into the future and she sees what could become of her friends if she suddenly disappeared and the group fell apart. Cyborg's machine side has rooted him to the tower. Beast Boy is nothing but a spectacle for others' amusement. Raven has fully withdrawn emotionally, and Robin is fine, mostly, but he does have a very bad mullet, so there's that.
Another thing I liked about the episode, besides the time travel, I'm a sucker for time travel, is that it roots into a basic fear of childhood. Will we be the same people when we grow up? That one was a joy to write. I like the way it came out in the end. My original working title for that one was Best Friends Forever, which is a bad title, but it seemed to be something everyone could relate to. I think everyone has someone from their childhood that they can't relate to as an adult. So I thought there was something emotionally powerful there. I had this idea that as Starfire went through the vortex, she saw the future change for the better. But Glenn said, "You don't want to show that." And he ended up being right about that.
A boy locked in a custody battle who needs to let go and trust his friends. A girl unable to control how her emotions and her behavior hurt other people. A boy who got into an accident and just wants to feel normal again. A girl afraid of what she'll grow up to be. A boy raised in a dysfunctional family who just wants everyone to be happy, and a girl confused as a stranger in a strange land and a stranger even to her own body. A group of writers, directors, and other creators got together over 3 years and made stories about what they thought were real emotions and situations that kids and teens deal with. Sometimes the episodes were silly, sometimes they were exciting, and sometimes they were on the pulse of something real.
Honestly, I can't quite put it into words why I love Teen Titans so much, but it will always have a special place in my heart. I'll always revisit it, especially when I'm going through a rough patch in my life and I need my comfort show.
I feel like every character kind of has their arc of like they grow and overcome their issues and become better because of each other. Especially, of course, you have characters like Raven, who spent her whole life knowing that she was gonna like literally cause the destruction of the world, and then she meets these friends who like they find out. Remember, she was so worried about her friends finding out, and then they don't care. They're like, we still love you. Or like Starfire coming to a new planet and not knowing the language, not knowing anybody, and then like how she has these friends who like help her become an Earthling, for lack of a better term. Or like Cyborg, how he's always stressing about like, I'm not really human, you know, I'm like, you know, he used to be like this football star and stuff, and then I'm not like that anymore, and I can't reach my full potential. And then his friends teach him that like, actually you can, because friendship, you know, like I feel like each character like has that. So I feel like that's the message, like your friends helping you be the best you can be, and like growth through teamwork and through friendship and through like finding people who accept you.
Things change. Things go away. And then all we're left with is a memory. But a memory can be beautiful. It can remind us of where we've been, what we struggled through, what made us laugh and be happy. Sometimes it's friends and family who support us. And sometimes it's fictional characters who give us the hope we need and teach us how to grow. Perhaps I've been uncomfortably sincere at points. People so often want to avoid cringe, or they'll condemn cringe. But man, sometimes I just want to look back. Nostalgia can be a good thing if you're willing to look at your past with open eyes and an open mind. Through reflection comes more appreciation and more understanding of the things you love and of yourself. This is a small YouTube channel, and this was a huge project for me. If you enjoyed the video, consider throwing a like my way. It helps the algorithm, but it also lets me know that this was valuable to people. And if you want to share how and why Teen Titans was special to you, I'd love for the comments section of this video to be a space for people to share their experiences. Teen Titans was special. And I want to thank Glenn Murakami, David Slack, Amy Wolfram, Rob Hoagie, and the rest of the cast and crew of Teen Titans for giving kids a show that took them seriously, made them feel things that weren't always easy, gave them hope to move forward, and taught us all that mustard can be a delicious beverage.
For me, like, the best part of Teen Titans was definitely, like, once I joined the fandom. I had already been, again, like, playing the Flash games on the website, or there were a few fan sites, like, Titans Tower, where they didn't have a forum, but they would post, like, episode reviews, or they would do interviews with the writers of the show. Like, they would post interviews with David Slack or whoever, and so I would read those. But when I joined TitansGo.net, I don't remember why I decided to like join a forum. But again, I was very young. I was literally in elementary school. I was like one of the youngest people on the site. I was on TitansGo.net for hours every evening. Like in every like thread that I could, I became like, you know, that website had a ton of users. I became like the number 8 most prolific poster of all the posts. Like most of the users were older, and so it was like, I'm this little kid and I get to hang out with like grown-ups and talk about this. And I'm a teacher now, and I use a lot of skills. Like for my students, I make my own PowerPoints and stuff, and I like draw my own picture books for my students. That started with TitansGo.net because I saw people doing fan art, so I started doing fan art. I saw people making like the graphics, like the avatars and the signature banners, right? So I downloaded GIMP and I taught myself how to do computer graphics. Like, people were making AMVs, or I guess not technically AMVs because it's not anime, but like the episode music videos. So I taught myself how to use Movie Maker, and like a lot of the bands that I, like the artists that I still listen to with music, I discovered on TitansGo.net. Like, it's weird, like, saying it out loud, but like it became a huge part of like developing my interests and like discovering things. I would not have discovered a lot of these things if I was not on that website all day. And the vibe was like, it was usually like so fun. You know, I learned to recognize the users, and like some of the users were just so funny and sarcastic, and like I scrolled for hours just like laughing my ass off, like reading what people were saying. Some of the jokes I didn't even really understand because I was so young, but like I knew that these people were funny. Like the administrators usually were really hilarious and sarcastic. Whenever there was like a troll that would come along and like get banned, you know, then there would be these like legendary trolls that like I still remember, just like the funny inside jokes that would develop from that.
Fandom in the early 2000s was much like it was today, where some people are chill about it and just want to share their joy with other people, and some people go around trying to pick a fight. There was just less moral posturing back then. There was the same amount of people thinking their opinions were the only right ones, but for me, the draw of finding like-minded community has always overpowered the nonsense, like ship wars and character bashing and whatever else fandom trolls like to spend their time doing. I always loved hearing people's thoughts and perspectives, and of course it's a great way to get recommendations for other media to check out, or fanfictions to read, or just make friends and have fun in a community. Every single friend I've had for more than 10 years of my life actually happened because of a fandom. In fact, back when we were 11 and 12 years old, the very first thing I said to the girl who is now my girlfriend of 8.5 years was, "Do you like Teen Titans?" And the rest was history.
When you first joined this board, you knew that someday it would cease to exist, or you would stop coming to it. You knew that the minute you logged in, but the point of this board isn't to last forever. It's to last long enough for people with similar interests and ideas to share and discuss, widening their realm of understanding and ultimately making them a better person. This is the forum where I learned what a real forum was, where I learned to make avatars, make fan art, and make fan fiction. Before I came around here, I didn't really know what fan fiction was, let alone how to write it. I learned darn near everything because of this board. It's given me a lot more than I've given it. I'll do everything I can to be on this forum until its last day. I'll still keep posting things I think about and things I want to discuss. You don't stop doing something just because you know it will end someday, because then nothing would ever be started.
If there's one thing my father taught me, it's to be loyal to what you believe in. Teen Titans was one of the few things that brought me happiness in my pissant life. It did something no other show could. It made me think. Something so small as simple dialogue between characters makes an influence on the right person. The show actually changed more or less the way that I think about life. Persistence pays off. If I may quote Hideo Kojima on Metal Gear Solid 4, it has been 18 years since the first Metal Gear game, and probably the fans have changed along with the series. They've gotten married or have children or are living in hard times. I wanted to give those users a pat on the shoulder and say, Snake's this old, but he keeps on going. Never give up. There is always hope. It is always darkest before the dawn. I will continue to reply on any and all topics posted, welcome new members, and generally be the best that I can be. Then, if and when this board finally falls, I will stand beside it, sword at my side, and salute in humble gratitude for all the memories I've made here. Memories will never die. Hurrah!
It's about family. It's about loving your friends and finding your support system and being there when they need you too. It's about learning to understand people from other walks of life or with other needs or other backgrounds and coming together to make something better. I think it's important to note that the show handled really dark, heavy topics in a delicate way that a 10-year-old could understand. And it still holds up to this day, even as an adult. Things like racism, the embarrassment of puberty, manipulation and abuse, even how it's okay to show fear, something that adults that I've met don't even know to this day. It was all handled with more heart than I've ever seen, and the element of humor kept it from being too awkward or scary. The general trend of happy endings helped, of course.
The fact that it could turn into Teen Titans Go later on proves that it didn't have to be just one thing. The show was not beholden to some kind of formula to work. The tone could change at any moment, and it would still be the show because the characters are that well realized. I wish those characters can exist forever, and thanks to Go, they just might. So I'm less heartbroken than I could be. I glanced at other media, but it was Go that the whole family loved. The first show that my wife, my kids, and I all laughed together with. It was a bonus gift I wasn't expecting.
It tackled a lot of issues. Just every character had their own kind of internal quarrel, and those problems or issues or whatever got addressed in the show, and it showed how the characters handled those issues. It was willing to be edgy. It was willing to be extremely dark at some points. And again, at that time, it tackled a lot of the mental, internal struggles that they were having, which is a big thing, because it showed that even, kids, teenagers around that age deal with stuff. They deal with a lot of struggles, and some people may not understand that.